said to the early joiners, I feel as though I've got you here under false pretenses, because it says the journey of a throws coach from novice to expert. It wasn't my choice of title, but I was also convinced that expert was fine because I'm an expert on myself rather than anything else. So I'm going to give this with all humility, and it is a bit warts and all. So bear with us as we go through this. But really what we're trying to look at here is the idea that we all start from a certain place and we're all trying to move on to somewhere better than where we are now. That's myself included, and many other expert coaches would be who are far better than I am, are in the same position, always trying to improve. So the first thing is that the idea of this is I've made many mistakes during my throwing coaching career, and as well as when I was a thrower myself. And the idea is that I make the mistakes for you, so you don't have to make the mistakes that I made, because sometimes they're a hard pill to swallow. So I'm going to go through some ideas of things that I saw myself doing and experienced myself, and you'll see that some of these are a little bit contrasted. So I'm going to show you first off in the first few bits and pieces what we hope to achieve by the end of the evening. So by the end of this webinar, we should learn from some of the mistakes I've made as a throws coach, which I've already said. Hopefully it'll give you some strategy to work through those mistakes and improve all of our coaching expertise, or the repertoire of skills we've got. I think we also need to take time here to draw breath sometimes and to reflect a little bit. And in so doing, we appreciate the contribution we made, and we can reflect on the journey we've taken, because all those things will help develop us further as coaches. And also throughout this, you might be starting, as I've often do and have written down, but I don't really share very often, is a set of values or philosophies by which I coach. So what I'm really trying to achieve in that. Hope that makes sense. So the first thing up is, these are my top 10 mistakes. I thought I was going to be a bit smart in this, and I was going to write down 9 mistakes, and then that would be another mistake that I can't count, but I actually went for the top 10. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to read through these, and you'll see that there's a little bit of conflict. And I think I am, if I was to be honest with you, I'm a bit conflicted in my coaching journey. Absolutely adore, I absolutely love throwing. I absolutely love athletics. I am passionate about it all, but it doesn't mean sometimes I'm not conflicted. So first off, I thought I was coaching the throws. Then I thought I was coaching athletes. I thought I was coaching the whole throw. I was coaching part of the throw. I thought I was coaching for distance. I thought I was coaching for technique and process. I thought I knew it all. I thought I knew nothing. I thought I would be rich. I thought I would be poor. So that doesn't make much sense to you now, but if I go through and I'll unpack each one of these as we go and show you where I've been and the pain I suffered, so you don't suffer the same pain, I hope. So when I thought I was coaching the throws, having been a mediocre thrower myself, one of my motivations for being a coach is that I thought I'd made enough mistakes as a thrower to be able to learn from my own mistakes there. So I'm sort of a mistakes-driven person, if you like. And what I did is I thought I'd never get to the point of being as bad starting off as I was. So I taught myself how to throw, big mistake. And when I got a coach, most of the coaches I worked with, and they were brilliant people, were trying to undo some of the poor stuff I'd given myself. So I read a book, and I tried, there wasn't even the internet at the time, so I was trying to teach myself from a book. And I also thought that, you know, there was one technical model available for everyone. So one size fits all, if you like, to throw in. So I thought also that they're all there to throw. So when people turned up to hear my wisdom as I went along, and to hear the pearls of precision that I was going to instill to them through my coaching repertoire, I all thought they were there to throw. But I realized soon that I was coaching athletes and people of a wide variety, both in terms of their physical capability, whether it be their anthropometrics, so how tall they were, how long their arms were, what weight they were, but also their ability in terms of agility, balance, coordination, speed, all the rest of it. Similarly speaking, I was learning very rapidly. I was coaching people from a vast social background, both in terms of income, socialization, race or class. You know, parental support goes into some of those things too, which is written later on. People of different training age or sports background, they may have come to me from various sports, having been a sports person for 5 or 6 years, or they may have come to me, this is their first attempt at any organized sport. I was coaching people from different aspirations, expectations. So I learned at the end of the day, I wasn't really coaching the event, I was coaching people and athletes. And so my learning for this one was, if you're coaching people and athletes, you've got to address their individual needs. You've got to be mindful of the fact they're all coming with a different background and a different future, if you like, but all we're trying to do is get the best for those people. So I learned I was coaching people and athletes. So now I realized I thought I was coaching athletes. I then discovered I was not. So this is where I am so conflicted. I was getting some of them fit. I was improving their agility, balance, coordination. I was trying to improve their fundamental movements. I was keeping some of them off the streets. I was providing free childcare or homework guidance because I'm a school teacher. That's the sort of stuff I do. I was being the reliable and consistent adult in the children's lives. I was educating both their parents and their carers in expectations and sometimes, dare I say, even manners about what to do and how to behave. I was managing expectations. I was often raising expectations. I was facilitating social interaction. I was instilling values and creating a culture. So all of those things that I've listed there, I'm reading them off as a list, but if you take some of those things and you examine them and how you work as a coach now, you realize there's a huge amount behind the fact that you think you're there to be a throws coach, but you are often trying to safeguard young people against themselves. Maybe they might be struggling at a different time and you have to be honest with them and make sure you take the right steps in that. You're sometimes dealing with parents who've got expectations that are placing their own child under pressure, or the fact they don't have any expectations and you're just providing free childcare because the track's quite close to Asda and you can get 2 hours shopping done while there's, down the field mucking about, whatever they do down there, because they take no interest. All right, so some of those people are coming there with low self-esteem. You might be thinking that, you can do little for them, but just the groups you organise and how you organise your training and how you organise your sessions has a massive impact on people. And I don't, albeit some of this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, I don't mean to underplay how important we are to other people. One of the most important things I've written on that list is really, a little bit way down the list, if I was putting them in sequential order, is the whole thing about being a reliable and consistent adult. For some of the people I've coached in the past, the fact I was there every Wednesday, every Friday and every Sunday was actually quite important for them, because I was going to be there whether it was raining or not. I was going to be there whatever the weather. I was going to be there on time, and I was going to be there for the period of time I said I was. And that, for some of the people, meant that there was at least a consistent adult in their life, which makes some of the people I was working with sound very hard done by. And in fact, they were hard done by the adults in their life. So we've got to be mindful of the fact it isn't always as nice in their lives as it perhaps is in my life at the time. So quite important. And that creating a culture and instilling values at the bottom. Athletics is brilliant, and we're so blessed with the idea that we are throws coaches and throws athletes, because at the end of the competition, we can shake all our competitors by the hand. And in my case, often saying, well done for beating me so soundly. And you can say, well done, and you can actually mean it, look them in the eye. You can also shake hands with the officials and thank them for their participation in making the event happen, because without that, because other athletes don't necessarily have that. So if you're a track athlete, you go past the timekeepers, you might see them later on to complain about your time, whatever it might be. You don't get the chance to thank the starter and all the rest of it. But we do, and we also have the chance to win and lose in the appropriate manner. So we're creating that idea of instilling values and lessons in life. And we talk about creating a culture, as we go through this, about a culture of having respect for each other, about things like turning up on time, and I'll talk about that as we go on. So when I thought I was coaching the throws, then I realised I was coaching athletes. So already you can see that I am conflicted. Then I get to the actual nub of throwing. So I thought I was coaching the whole throw. So, you go and you do a full approach in a javelin, or you do a full turn in the discus, because that's what you do. If you want to throw far, you've got to do a turn. So I thought complete movements were the way to go. Then I realised that the throw was made up of different parts that all fitted together. I had to make adaptations. So, although throwing is as you'll see later on, a thing that has grace and beauty about it, we can't really get to that point of having someone throw well unless we can do all those little separate parts properly and accurately to bring us to the point where we can make the throw proper. And this is where I'm really talking about being a bit brave. Sometimes there's pressure on us as throws coaches to say, no, just keep going. That you've got to be able to do a turn, or that you've got to do a full approach. You've got to be able to do your crossovers properly. Instead of saying, hold on a second, we're going to stop the activity. We might make changes, make it easier or harder. We might progress the activity. We might change the weight of the implement. We might change the activity completely. We might break it down into small parts. We might put it back together. We might use guided discovery, like ask them how it felt. But I think the most important thing about being a throws coach in terms of the whole throw is being brave enough to say, stop, that isn't working, intervening. And the other thing that comes through when I'm coaching now and trying to help other coaches improve their coaching repertoire is the idea that you don't have to be all things to all people. So I think sometimes when I coach, one of my mistakes I still make, I'm saying, right, we're just going to concentrate, I don't know, on working with an athlete this week on her right side in the javelin. We're going to raise the right side, make sure you're nice and tall on the right side. And she does everything perfectly on the right side, and I see that. And then I'll turn around to her and say, yeah, but you pulled away with your left. Well, either I'm coaching the right side or I'm not coaching the right side. So try not to be all things to all people. And what I learned is if you're concentrating on one thing, then concentrate on that one thing, because it's not fair on the athlete. And the other thing is it diminishes your ability to identify that technical point. If you can only see the right side, and then someone says, oh, it was, her left finger, or she wasn't doing this with her head. If you weren't looking at it, you can't make a judgment on it. All right. So be brave enough to intervene, stop the movement, say enough is enough, and take it back. They have to, as we often say now, earn the right to progress. Right. So I thought I was coaching part of the throw. So I've just said that I see the throw, I want to coach the whole throw, and then realize I have to break it down. But then, of course, you have to do both, because you're not going to be in a situation where they're just going to go through robotically, as I call it, throw by numbers. So you do the first bit, the second bit, the third bit, because the whole thing about throwing, it's got a beauty about it. I'm going to get a bit teary-eyed here, so I apologize if I start breaking down here and crying into the mic. But it's a seamless throw through each part. If you see a throw done properly and well, it's got amazing acceleration. It's got a great balance, and the shapes look great. There's a grace about it. There's a power about it. There's a beauty about it. And all throughout this thing, if you're not careful and you're going to do standing throws, you're going to do standing throws, you're going to do South Africans, you're going to do, short approach, working the javelin, you're only going to do swings around your head with a hammer, or then we look at the end of that and it just is the one part of it. But the beauty of throwing is a fling of beauty is a joy forever, is the fact that you learn to say, when it looks right, it probably is right. And sometimes we get caught up, and quite rightly so, with the technicality of the whole event. But sometimes when you put it together and it has a seamless flow about it, it is a thing of great beauty. All right. So, regardless of whether you're looking at the one thing or the other thing, is sometimes we need to take a step back and go, my gosh, that did actually have a flow and an acceleration about it. And some of those things you can only see in its entirety. And of course, if it doesn't have that flow and beauty about it, that's a work in progress, and we can work on from there. Confused yet? You will be. So we came on. I thought I was coaching for distance. So as a coach in training, we often become obsessed with how far it goes. We might start measuring their throws. They measure every training session. I, in fact, allowed myself to become seduced by the tape. I became outcome driven. I want to know, has it improved? And if they threw further, somehow that validated me as a coach, because they threw further and I'm their coach. But what that did is made me biased towards the outcome. I was totally dedicated. So regardless of how they threw further, maybe they threw further because, I don't know, they weren't so tired, or maybe they threw further because they'd gone 6 inches during the winter break, or through the period of time when they weren't, so stressed by school. So I started judging both the athlete and myself by the distance achieved. And I lost sight of my responsibility to place the athlete at the center of my coaching. In some part, same with Power of 10. Power of 10 is brilliant, but I think sometimes people get obsessed with the idea that, they're in the top 10 for their athletes in the top 10, and it starts to become more about the coach than it does about the athlete. So I think I lost sight about my responsibility to place the athlete at the center of my coaching. Because we go back to the first stuff we're talking about, we are coaching athletes, we are coaching people. And if we don't modify our plans for those people to make the best for that individual person, then we're not going to get the best out of them, either in terms of their distance long term, or in terms of their longevity in, if you like, the athletics world, or the long-term athlete development, as I say later on. I also sort of became blinded to the individual needs of the person, as I said. I didn't know whether they were throwing far or less far, or whatever it may be, whether it's due to growth spurts, tiredness, injury, homework, relationships, whatever else it might be. It was cutting across the idea that they could throw far. So, case in point, a lad I used to coach, very good athlete, worked really hard. Technically speaking, he was pretty good. He went to the English schools, and the week before he went to the English schools, I would say he'd undergone a growth spurt. When he got to the English schools, I didn't know whether he was left-handed or right-handed, how badly he was throwing. And he should have won by considerable distance, and he finished second. He was absolutely destroyed by it. But, you know, I was far enough into my coaching career to know that he'd actually undergone quite a physical change in quite a period of time. And his throwing actually got considerably worse before it got better again once he sort of reintroduced himself to his coordination in his body after a period of time. So we're dealing with people that are going through lots of changes in their life, whether it be physical ones or emotional ones. And sometimes we're driven by the tape rather than the process and the interaction you have between the coach and the athlete. It can actually do some long-term damage, I think would be the worst situation to the athletes that are in our care. So I forgot about long-term athlete development, and I learned it was coaching for process and technique, not for outcome. I would have thought I was coaching for process. So as a coach, I'm now coaching for process, I'm coaching for technique, and I became too obsessed with how things compared to the ideals we have in our head. I wanted everyone to throw like, I don't know, Gerd Kanter or Wolfgang Schmidt if they're throwing discus. So I wanted everyone to throw like, I don't know, Oberhof or some of the people from way back in time that you might think of, like Ruth Fuchs in the javelin, or someone else, you know, that you might have had that they may not have ever seen, not even black and white video on the internet. And of course, we're not then recognizing the idea that we are looking at athletes individually. We're looking at the coaching process. That may not match up with the ideal. But I also therefore lost sight of how the positions and shapes we're trying to achieve, that we need to generate force on the ground up and acceleration. I lost sight of our need to have optimal release and speed. And I knew the athletes needed to throw far to be competitive. So it's all very well me going, I didn't want to coach for distance because I want to coach for technique. But we are solely judged in our sport about how far it lands away from your feet. All right. So I learned I was coaching for distance because that's our event. So between I thought I was coaching for technique and I'm now coaching for distance lies the real truth of what we're trying to do. Of course, we're trying to improve their technique, but we're trying to make them appropriately strong in the right way to achieve the right thing to improve their distance. So I am coaching for distance, but I want it to be done with proper technique at the proper time that's commensurate with their athletic ability, their strength, their physical capabilities, and in some respects, their lifestyle. So we are coaching for distance because that's our event. We can't go in there and go, well, that was not a particularly good throw. It only went 30 meters, but my gosh, if I was marking you out of 10, it would have been a 9 out of 10 because that's not our event. All right. So we are coaching for distance, but that distance can only really be achieved by the proper technique and achieving the proper positions with the proper acceleration through the proper angles and all the rest of it that takes place. And that's where you know your athletes, you develop the model that suits that athlete, you work on their technique, you get them to apply force in the right way, and the distance will come because it has to come because we're coaching for distance. We want our athletes to be competitive. Right, so now we're getting into even more of my personal pain. So I thought I knew it all. So at some stage in my coaching career, I thought I knew it all. Yes, I was that person who thought, what more could I learn? I've been on courses, I'd read books, I'd watched DVDs. And of course, ultimately, I knew I didn't know it all. I was just pretending. I still don't know it all. I'm still eager to learn more. I, literally take any opportunity I can to improve my understanding of the throws events and try and learn from other events also. If I had stuck with the belief that I knew it all, I would have stopped all sorts of growth and opportunity for me as an individual. I would have diminished my chances of self-improvement, whether it be in the coaching aspect or whether it be in my whole life aspect, whether it be in terms of, my career outside of athletics. We've also, could reflect on some of the things that go on another place of life. And to become a lifelong learner I think is a really good thing because it keeps us fresh. We're able to learn from other people and we're able to move forward. I'd also missed out on a joyful company of other throws coaches, both within the UK and beyond. I've had fantastic opportunities because I've been willing to learn and improve, to spend a huge amount of time with people, whether it be standing in the back of the circle at Bedford at National Champs, young athletes meeting in Harrow, or, track in Watford, or in fact, indeed, in places like Ireland and Portugal and Germany and, lots of places I've been to learn from other throws coaches. And it is joyful company because unlike some other communities in athletics, the throws community are very much wanting to share. I've never met a coach who hasn't wanted to help me out when I've asked them a question. I would have denied myself a lot of amazing opportunities, not only to spend some time with throws coaches, but some of the stuff that may come with that. To work with other people's athletes for a period of time, which is a fantastic opportunity, but it's also in some respects, huge responsibility too, to be sort of given that opportunity to work with other people's athletes for a period of time is not to be taken lightly. I said I learned a great amount from that myself. And also, more importantly, I think this is the nub of what I'm doing here, is that if I thought I knew it all and I wasn't willing to learn, I wasn't willing to listen, I wasn't willing to, pick the brains of people far better than myself, I would deprive some of the athletes I work with of getting a better experience. Because ultimately, we're not coaching, very much doubt, if you're coaching for your own self-aggrandizement. You are there presumably because you want to help the athletes develop or contribute back to the sport you love. And I think if we think we knew it all and we're not willing to learn and move forward, it's the athletes who will suffer in the end. So if I had thought I knew it all and stuck by that, I think my athletes would have not got as good a deal as they got. Hopefully, to still get a better deal for the athletes I'm working with now. So I learned that excellence was a journey and not a destination. And so I thought I knew it all. Then I thought I knew nothing. So again, I told you I was conflicted, and I think England Athletics are going to be paying for my counselling at the end of this when I finished. I thought I knew nothing. So sometimes as a coach, you may become the focus of blame and excuses. So people may not perform very well. They may turn around and go, why did that happen? That's obviously something to do with you rather than to do with me. Sometimes we do not help ourselves as well because we don't value ourselves and the work we're doing fully enough. Many of us coach for free, and I understand that. I coach for free. It's what I do and have done, and as many of you will be. There's very, very few paid coaches in the UK. That's a whole different webinar, by the way. But it doesn't mean just because we coach for free, it doesn't mean we're doing a professional job and we are doing what we should be doing for our athletes, and it's done well. But there's a huge amount of planning goes into it, preparation, all the rest of it that goes into each session, each season, if you like. And if we do all of that work and we do it for free, it doesn't mean it has no value, right? So others may perceive it that way. So I was blamed in my time for other people's shortcomings, not only their athletes, but for other people, like parents and other people. People took my work for granted. So I was a coach, and my session starts, on a Sunday morning. They start at 10:30. People turning up at 11 o'clock because it's free and they're not having to pay for it. I guarantee them if they were having a tennis lesson that cost them £50 an hour and it started at 3 o'clock, they'd be there at 3 o'clock. So if people start taking your work for granted just because it's free, it doesn't mean it's without a value. So when I thought I knew nothing, I think I was in some respect to blame for that myself, because I think I didn't put enough value on what I was doing. I was allowing other people's shortcomings and their own anxieties to be projected onto me. And my work was then taken for granted. So then I started questioning myself and my ability to coach. I worried that I was not doing enough for the athletes in my care. But the bottom line of it is, if we do take stock of what we do look at ourselves and say that we're doing the best job we can do, that has value to it. It may not be charged, you may not receive monetary reward for that effort that you put in. But if we're true to ourselves, we can't end up thinking you know nothing. So I learned in this case how to reflect and evaluate. Right. And I think that's one of the strengths. I think now even I'm trying to always improve and reflect on what I do. So after this is finished, I will go through the pain of reflection and evaluating it with Nick Ridgen, who's going to be on the receiving end of this. So then we're into the whole idea, I thought I would be rich. Right, so if you've tuned into this webinar thinking that I'm going to be rich by being a coach, I think you've tuned into the wrong webinar. You will not be financially rich by tuning into this webinar. But I absolutely was enriched. So I thought I would be rich, maybe not in monetary terms, but I have absolutely been enriched by helping people develop. So winning with humility and losing with dignity. That's quite an important thing. Forget athletics, think about life in general. The fact that you can be humble, and you can possess dignity, that we've got other things that we can do, like pushing people beyond their comfort zone, trying new things. always seeking to improve, trying to improve people's fitness. I put fitness in inverted commas there because I think even more as I look back on my coaching career, I've spent quite a lot of time looking at people's fitness, but it isn't their physical fitness, it's sometimes their emotional fitness too. So there's a huge responsibility for us as coaches that we sometimes don't look to, but it's also sometimes it's very enriching. So I've learned huge amounts from the athletes I coach. I'm very lucky to have coached in a sort of urban situation where there's a large number of people from other countries other than England, and I've had great lessons in learning about people's race and culture. I've also had the great fortune to coach people who would be described as being disabled. I've had people who've suffered from mental health issues and disordered eating, and my journey with them has been probably more beneficial to me than I've probably given them, because they've helped me understand some of these issues far better than I could ever have hoped to, and certainly could have read in a book. So there's lots of things that I've learned from my athletes, which I'll be eternally grateful. I've learned a huge amount from the athletic community and the throws community, in specifically the throws community, but I've also learned from all disciplines. So I was talking to a coach friend of mine, Keith, yesterday. Met him by chance. We were both coaching in the same venue, socially distanced by about 150 meters. But we had a shouty conversation over about 10 meters at the end, and he was saying that he learned a lot about his athletes hadn't been able to get into the weights room, and he had a massive discussion about whether weights were needed and could they develop power in other ways. So just even casual conversations have been huge to me. But I've also had, again, lots of colleagues both here and abroad have helped me. I've also been very fortunate through my coaching career to experience different countries. So going to places like China, Estonia, Germany, Georgia, Portugal, wherever you might be, is those experiences going with athletes with a defined purpose to those places was very enriching to me, to see how other systems operate, how other coaches operate in other countries. If you've got half an hour, I'll tell you at some stage about the Russian hammer coaches who were at the back of the hammer circle at a competition I was at. Not much coaching taking place, but quite a lot of being drunk. But I learned throughout all of that I was enriched. I wasn't financially rich, but I was certainly enriched as a person. So then I thought I would be poor. So if you are going to be poor through being a coach, so there isn't one coach watching this that hasn't made some either personal sacrifice, financial sacrifice, gone coaching when they could have gone to earn money, and blah, blah, blah. So it goes on that you've done that. But this is my chance to say to you, thank you for the price you pay, because all coaches watching this will have been on a similar journey. It costs you time, planning, coaching, feeding back, evaluating, going to competitions, overcoming poor facilities, access to tracks, throwing areas, whatever else it might be, costs you time. It costs you emotionally, because you're emotionally involved with these athletes in the appropriate way. You've got a duty of care, trying to keep people physically safe and emotionally safe. You are undergoing some sort of journey with those athletes in your care through recent times, no doubt about exams being cancelled and so on and so forth. So there's a huge amount of stuff taking place that's going to cost you emotionally. And included in that, I think, time away from family. So you're, as often being accused of me, is that you're spending time with other people's children other than your own child. And it is true, but it's the commitment you make when you're a coach. It costs you money. So traveling to training, competitions, going on courses, equipment, books, DVDs, subsidising your athletes. So often, and don't imagine there's many of us who haven't paid the entry fee for some of the athletes we coach from poorer financial backgrounds, or you've got someone else to pay it for them. All right. But I learned through that I can solve my own problems and get help. And I also know that altruism and being part of a community made me happy. Right, so there's quite a lot in what we do there, that it may not be that we are going to be poor and only poor, but there is quite a big payback in another way. So solving your own problems is quite rewarding, and the altruism and being part of a community that made me happy is also important, because it's great joy in coaching, as we all know. So I've just shown some of the things here, and I'm not suggesting for the first instance this is all my own work. These are basically the community we have as a throws group that we run. It's based at a school, and we've done all we can because we've got no decent facilities. So top left is Michael Pope. He's an F41 athlete. So that's people of short stature. So the grass is long, but it isn't that long, so it comes up to his backside. We started throwing in a marsh because nobody else was using the marsh. We got free topsoil from a teacher's dad, delivered some free topsoil, spread it on the marsh, and we saved the marsh and turned it back into a grassy area we can throw. So we claimed it back. It was like we took it. It was like reclamation, like they did in the Netherlands prior to the 1950s. And then we started throwing off a strip of concrete. We made the circles out of rubber. So we got some rubber and we cut circles out of that rubber, and you can see the circles there. We begged old Mondo to make a javelin run up. You can see in the second picture of the run up there that the lines of the track are misaligned on the piece that we put down. So he's just made a javelin run up because we didn't have one. And then we tried to make indoor facilities. So made a shot circle from buffalo board, and it's a real stock board. Bought that, cut out the back of the circle out of a piece of plywood, painted it, put it on there. It's quite a good coaching tool as well, because if they go offline, whether it be rotating or if they're gliding and they land not on the circle, you know it's a coaching tool because they've gone too far in one direction. So also made a discus circle, the same construction. We used to throw it into a net, so we got access to a youth club that was condemned. Don't ask me about how legal it was, I'm not sure, but it had a very leaky roof. It used to rain in there, but it was a place that you could actually throw indoors and stay relatively dry and relatively, I wouldn't say warm, but it was actually colder sometimes in it was outside. But we used that for a period of time. It's now been demolished, and they moved those circles to another place I train at. So just by a bit of creativity, we were able to do this. Not really putting this up here saying this is the sort of facilities you could have. Hopefully you've got better facilities than this, but it actually was quite important in instilling in the group of athletes I had, and the, if you like, the squad of athletes over a number of years, that you're part of something bigger here. You're trying to work for the betterment of all. So the concrete that was laid at the back of the javelin was laid down by a colleague of mine, and a lot of the athletes were in attendance to make sure that it was, you know, other things like running to get water, fetching tools, bits and pieces. So they've all had a part to play in it, and that sort of builds, if you like, a group ethos or a coaching group ethos. And then we begged and borrowed other stuff. So, like, for example, if you recognise our throws emporium, some people call it a hut, but I think that's a little bit unkind. Our throws emporium is, in fact, an old electricity substation. So that was due for scrap. Actually stopped the lorry that was travelling on as it was leaving a place near school and said, "Where's that going?" And the lorry driver said, "It's going to be scrapped." I said, "If you just turn in here, you can leave it in the field. It will cost you no money to get it scrapped." He was absolutely delighted, and he left it there, and we eventually put it up. And inside that, we put in our self-made javelin rack. So that's made out of water tubes, and we just put the javelins, and then we got some nice little bungs stuck them in. So 400, 500, 600, 700, and the 800 in the bottom. Got some cheap racks, got some discus, borrowed stuff. Some people suggest that some stuff was stolen, but that's absolutely not true. We deny that. So it wasn't stolen. I can actually say that categorically, but we borrowed stuff and stuff that had been thrown out. Like we got a storage unit, which is shots you can see at the back there from the science lab. And really what I'm saying here is that if we're waiting for something to happen or someone else to do something for you, it's probably never going to happen. So in some respects, you can take charge of your own destiny. Not necessarily this, but if you get that group momentum, and I think of people like Paul Wilson up in the north of the country, who's got a great ethos in his throwing group, and there appears to be no bounds of what they can do. So there is plenty of examples all over the place, and this is just one way we built a sort of an ethos around our throwing group, but it's not saying it's the only way to do it. There's other things you can sort of rally behind and have. But it does also give them ownership, and there's no problem with them, you know, not treating it with respect or treating it properly. So we've reached the end of there, and I've deliberately tried to rush through that because I think there might be some questions about why it was so conflicted, how I contradicted myself with 5 points. There were 10 points, would split into 5 contradictions, if you like, about where I've been on my coaching journey and how it went. Nick, you're back.
I'll jump in there. No, that was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed that. I was giggling along in parts, and I was getting emotional in other. Yeah, proper roller coaster of 35 minutes or so. So no, thank you very much for that. It was really, really enjoyable. So yeah, over to you guys now. If you want to stick any questions in for Garry or myself about the presentation or anything else, or if you just want, like me, to hear a little bit more about these Russian hammer coaches, then stick it in the chat box now. It makes it far easier to raise it if you stick a question mark at the end of your question.
I'll start about hammer coaches. So you're coming from Ireland or England or anywhere in the UK, and we look to the Russians as being the model for hammer throwing. So we're all thinking, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see when they're working with athletes. I had a very good fortune. I was out in China at the World Youth Olympics, and I was in charge of throwers from Ireland. There's a lad there, Adam King, who was an excellent hammer thrower, and he was like warming up, and we were doing some training sessions prior to the event, and we were all waiting for the hammer coaches to arrive, and the hammer athlete arrived, and he looked in great shape, and he was technically very good, and he wasn't by far the best, but he was very good. The Hungarian lad was brilliant, but we were watching them and thinking, no, where's the coaches? When the coaches arrived, two coaches turned up. And bear in mind, I was taking my job very seriously, videoing, asking the athlete for, what I should be looking for and all the rest of it. And they sat at the back of the circle, way behind where most of the coaches were seated and standing, and consumed about 4 or 5 bottles of, I assume it must have been Chinese vodka. And literally every day they turned up, we're thinking, it can't be like this all the time. I don't know how they got the trip, but I didn't ever see them sober. So, and there's plenty of witnesses that it's all made up. But you think these people are going to be talking about someone's left toe or whatever else it was. Basically, the athlete was left to his own devices, and these two coaches were laying on the grass with and getting up, which also upset me as a geography teacher, walking away and leaving their bottles behind, which is I think. But sometimes you see people and you think they're going to be demigods, and they end up being people who like a party rather than the coach. So that was a bit of a surprise.
Great story. I love it. I've had opportunities some team coaching. You do see some weird and wonderful behaviours from some of the other people that are involved. Have we got any questions in so far? So please stick in your questions as we go through this. So yeah, reflections as well. Really, really interesting. So some people have sent in some reflections already. So we've got some reflection in here from. I can shout that, make that a question. A reflection from Amanda.
That's fantastic. I'd bow to your superiority there in understanding that, because that's that resonates with me straight away. Just to have a look at the athlete's face when they do well. And the other thing is that, I mean, you're talking there, athletes all do with the friendships they make through sport is amazing. So my oldest friend is someone I've known. He didn't even go to my school. He's actually Dr. John Chalice. He's a professor of biomechanics at Penn State University, still in regular contact. But the reason why I know him is he used to throw the shot for Bognor, and I used to throw the discus for Horsham Blue Star. And our friendship has survived quite a long time just based on athletics. There's more to it now, of course. And simply speaking, friends I've got like Terry McHugh from my own athletics career, who's a lifelong friend, Dave Queenie, all these people who I consider amazing people. And it's not just throwing that resonates with us now, but I couldn't echo what you're saying more loudly. That's a fantastic point, Amanda. Full marks to you. Brilliant.
So I've got a question for you then, whilst people are sort of thinking of their own. You ranked them in your top 10 mistakes. What's your biggest one, and what's your biggest learning been?
I think my biggest mistake was, I think, allowing myself in some respects to be in the role of I thought I knew nothing. I think that was the thing, that sometimes you can allow other people to steal your self-worth, if you like. I'm not suggesting I'm a shrinking violet, but sometimes people question stuff, and you look at other people and they go, they might say something about your athlete when you're competing, and it might be said so that you can hear or not. They, generally speaking, they're not nasty people, because nearly every throws coach I've met has been more than willing to share. But you end up taking it personally. But they've got no idea about the coaching journey that you're on with that athlete, so they don't know that they've recovered from a broken ankle they had in rugby or anything. And I think sometimes you allow that to sap your confidence as a coach. Whereas a simple thing about coaching is pick on one thing that needs repair to improving your athlete, and work on that technique till it gets better, and then pick on the next thing and execute like that. So I don't think trying to be all things to all people is the way forward. And sometimes you end up thinking you know nothing when in fact you know huge amounts. And I think that's my frustration with some of the coaches I see these days. I look at them and go, blimey, you're amazing, but they don't have the confidence they should have. So there's a role for some of us in that, some of the more senior coaches to senior in age, that is, by senior in rank, to make sure they do have that self-belief and confidence.
Well, something that we've seen as part of the junior talent programs, we put that tracker in place, and the improvement from the start to the end of it, because they were then it was forcing them to reflect and say, well, am I a 2 out of 5? Can I put myself a bit higher? Actually, I do know quite a lot here, because I can do this technical stuff, and I can do this planning stuff, and I can do all of that. And that was really, really nice to see. So
yeah, good.
We do have a question in, so from Joe. How far has your coaching journey been so far? So I know you look about 21, but
Joe, I know this is going to come as a surprise to you, but you're saying that and you're thinking, now how can that man have been coaching since he's been? Well, it depends if I'm going to have to lie here. I'm 58 years of age, so I've been coaching since I have been 24, since I started teaching. So I don't know how long that is. My first coaching was actually in a school in London. I taught in 2 schools in London, and neither of them had a school field. So we used to throw rubber discus on the playground, and I got a girl to finish second in the London Schools Championships, having never ever been in a circle before, having never thrown a discus on the grass, and never thrown a metal discus. So goes back to when I was 24. So 24, quite a long time. But it's been a brilliant journey though in some respects. So a long time.
I think this next question sort of links in a little bit. So is it the time, or is it the fact that you have this reflective, like this self-reflection process in place that accelerates it? Because you could do years and years of coaching, but if you do the same year over and over again, you're not progression. So is it the fact that you've got this self-reflection process going on within your coaching? And if it is, like, how do you undertake that, and how do you go about self-reflection? Do you have a set process, or is it?
So that's a really good question, because I think if you're not careful, when I first started coaching, again, this is warts and all, my reflection wasn't reflection. My process was I was beating myself up over stuff. So instead of me going like, why did that not happen today? Why was it that this didn't work? And why is it that, in spite of the fact that I'm using those words, that she ain't getting it? So I was literally going, it isn't working, instead of saying, I've got to think of another way of doing this. So it literally becomes a habit. So you might say something and you say to the athlete, does that make sense to you? Can you tell me what that means to you? And so that reflection isn't just at the end of a session, you're reflecting all the time. And I think if it just asked me over myself to ask questions. So I use the word TED to remind me of what I'm to do. So I will say something to the athlete, and I might say back to them, tell me what you understand by what I've said. Explain to me what you think you're meant to be doing here, or describe to me the movement you think you need to make now. So I use TED, and Ted's my mate. So Ted's going to be with me all the time. I take Ted with me wherever I go. Tell, explain, describe. And that's for the athlete to help me to be a better coach. So I say self-reflection, it's sometimes often reflection using the athlete. And of course, at the end of the session, I'll go away and I'll think about what I did wrong. What I didn't do when I first started was to do that in a constructive way. I used to say, well, it isn't working, this isn't working. Instead of sort of saying, hold on a second, it's just probably a nuance of language here, or an ability to demonstrate whatever it might be. I used to beat myself up over the fact I wasn't getting through to them. So if it's a more structured thing and it happens more regularly, it just becomes part of what you do. So, I'll ask them to explain to me, I'd ask them to tell me, or I'd ask them to describe to me what they're doing. So TED is what I use.
I really like that simple way of approaching it. Beautifully simple, I would say, that TED. Good way. Got some questions, reflections in here from a few of the people that have attended, which is great. Question in, another reflection, which is good. So someone's.
Can I just say, Cheryl made a point there about she takes it that one there. She's talking about as an official. It sometimes makes it nice for her when they say it is absolutely fundamental that our athletes, which are in some respects a reflection of you as a coach, at the end of when they're competing, win, lose or draw, that they go up and say thank you, or obviously not shaking their hand anymore, Cheryl, but you say thank you for being here, thank you, because the officiating, it's part of, not even if they've got a series of bad calls whatever it may be, you've got to take it and deal with that and be polite and mean it and say it to people. So it's really important that happens. So that's part of the thing of talking about values and instilling it sort of a group culture, that you've got to be polite to each other, help each other out, and also make sure you're thanking the officials and the other athletes. There's no competition without the other athletes, and there's no competition without the officials. So that's a really good point, well made.
Another question from Joe. Do you preferred throw you like to coach?
Can you see that? If you can't see that, I'm holding up a discus thrower. I actually love all throws, but I think I love the discus because it's so involved. If I was to rank them in how I like them to be seen, in terms of competition, I'd like to see discus first. But in terms of throws, I think they've all got their own beauty. My least capable throw to coach is hammer. I am all right at coaching hammer, but no better than all right. That's something I'm going to be improving over the next few years. I love the hammer, but it's just I've never been in a place where they've had the facility to throw hammer, so it's not something I've been able to do.
So you said there, like, hammer is something that you're wanting to improve, but you're limited with facilities or whatever. Like, so do you set annual or termly goals for yourself as a coach, or do you go like long term? I want to be here when it comes to a coach, so I want to be the team coach with the England team, or you do the bits with Ireland and things like that, or is it more sort of fluid with how you progress? So myself, like I've said, I want to develop myself as a hammer coach and my knowledge of hammer coaching, and I want to then develop myself as a more in javelin, because I know like they're my weaker points, or shot and disc. I'm more sort of experiencing and feel more confident in. So I've set myself some goals in terms of I need to know, I need to be a better coach in these areas, and how am I going to measure it and things. Is that something you do? Because I know it's something that I've learned from being an athlete, not a very good one, it has to be said, but from being an athlete and sort of setting these smarter, or whatever type of words you want to use for like goal setting as a coach. Is it something you actively do and would encourage, or is it much more fluid?
No, I don't have sort of aspirations to do. I mean, I think it sounds a bit like I don't have aspirations to do this, that, and the other, but I have been very well rewarded for being like a coach, in terms of I've been picked to go on, multiple trips. I've had some fantastic opportunities, but all I'm trying to do each time I go is to try and be the best I can be at whatever I'm doing and serve my athletes in the best way I can. But I recognise there's a shortfall in that. So my day-to-day work is not sort of set out to be, I'm going to be this, and this, because I'm coaching shot, discus, and javelin on a regular basis, and I'm just trying to do the best job I can when I go there and make sure I give, the right information, the right feedback. But the one I don't coach very often, and don't have much experience in, is hammer. So in the background, there's a sort of parallel line going. I must improve on that. If someone turns up to me and wants to throw a hammer, and we can find a facility, then I need to be able to serve them properly. But I'd also say that I don't have any issue about improving my hammer, because there's quite a few people I know who are absolutely fantastic hammer coaches who I could spend 2 or 3 days with and improve my hammer coaching immensely. So people I've worked with in the past that it just could take me. So Rob Earl would be someone I'd go and say, teach me some stuff about hammer that I need to know, and he's so good it can only but be a fantastic learning experience, not only for the hammer, but for another way to get a message across about my own coaching in the events I do coach regularly. So it's not even just about coaching the hammer. You can learn so much from other people all the time.
Got a question in from a hammer thrower who's dipping his toe into bits of coaching as well. So from Craig. So the biggest challenge we face as athletes and coaches, the mental aspect and the ups and downs of life, training and competing. It is the difference between throwing 30 meters or 70 meters, and also an athlete being happy or sad in life. Have you got any strategies that you use with your athletes to tackle this? And how would you adapt current coaching methods to encourage this mental aspect of throwing?
Right. So I think the thing is that I go back to my early career as a coach, and thinking I was coaching the throws, and you end up coaching far more than that, because you're coaching people. Is that I learned huge amounts. I mean, stuff that you would fill books about people's emotional journeys and their aspects. So take disordered eating as an example. And I said it sounds terrible, but I've been very lucky to be involved with someone who's been on a very difficult journey for herself. You know, her eating's been quite disordered at periods of time in her life, you know, and I've only but learned with that. And it's not, you know, the outward signs of what happens there. It's about the mental anguish that goes on beyond that. And it's absolutely true that you can only be at your best when you're happy in your own world and there isn't something impinging on that. But strategy that I'd use to tackle that is the fact that it's not really so much a strategy, but it is something which I also alluded to earlier on, is the fact that you might possibly be, especially coaching young people, the most consistent and trusted adult in their life. Now, sometimes that requires you to make a tough decision or a tough call on something where you have to report something that you think is wrong and you have to go through procedures. So that might place you in a difficult position at a period of time. But you've got to do what's right by the athlete. But when you have built that trust, you can learn so much from your athletes. And even the point that they're coming to you and going, you know, I'm really unhappy about this, this, and this. And you don't have to have the answer, but you have the ability to listen and say, look, I'm not sure I've got the answer, but I'm here if you want to talk. Can make a massive difference to some of these people. And I think, you know, those journeys, I mean, I don't know of anyone who's happy all the time. So those journeys are really important. So strategies for doing that as a coach is the fact you're there to listen, because you are coaching them throwing, you might be coaching them, you know, shot and discus, wherever it might be, but you're also there as the adult in their life that's going to be someone who they would trust. And if they trust you, they're going to tell you about it anyway. So it's not so much a strategy, it's about building relationships and making sure that there is that trust. But that trust isn't the situation where they tell you stuff and you don't report it on. It's the fact that if you notice something and they're in some sort of harm's way, you make sure you follow through on that too, because they may not like you in the short term, but they'll love you in the long term because it's something that's going to intervene in their lives and get stuff sorted out. So I think not a strategy, more of a building relationships and that build that sort of. I think trust is the way to keep going back. The trust that exists between you and the athlete.
Great question though from Craig.
Yeah,
so one that's a little bit more specific in terms of the mental approach to it. So it's about motivation. So do you have any tips you can share to help keep motivation up through the lows?
For me as a coach or for the athletes?
I don't know, Matthew, can you put something in the group, whether it's coaches orientated or athlete orientated? As a coach, he's saying.
Right, so as a coach, right, this is quite interesting because one of the athletes I was talking about there has written her master's thesis on throws coaching and how sometimes throw coaches don't ever get asked about how they're feeling themselves. So it's quite important that you do need to keep your own motivation, your own self-worth and your own happiness to the fore, because otherwise you can't really do your athletes a great service. But I think the thing is that when you go there is that my motivation is kept up through the lows by the fact that, you know, sometimes you come up against problems, and often the lows are to do with people not directly, so access to facilities or the fact you don't have something you need or things like that are often quite demotivating. But I think it's the fact that you see through the athletes that you can still make progress, and some of those joint projects we did would have certainly kept my motivation up through the lows when you're trying to solve a problem and the athletes are involved in that. But to keep your motivation up through the lows, I would also suggest that there's someone you can speak to. So if you've got a coach mentor or you're someone you trust who is a coach who will understand what you're doing, and you say to them, look, I'm finding this quite difficult, they're not going to turn around and go, don't be stupid. They're going to say, funny enough, I went through that myself. And they might have a specific solution to that specific problem. But I think the community of throws coaches is the secret to all of this, because if you can ask someone who you can share your, you know, anxieties with someone and speak about it, you'll often find that actually it's not uncommon. And secondly, it's the fact that they've probably been through it themselves. All right. So I would suggest you find yourself a throws coach buddy, is what I'm saying here.
And I think that might be a way to, if you join a regional community of practice, which we're setting up at the moment, that's maybe where you can get those coach buddies and that wider network of people that you can tap into who are going through similar experiences as you. I think just a point to kind of raise that the self-care as coaches is really, really important. I know UK coaching are putting together resources and things around that, and I actually sit on the one of the steering groups for UK sport around mental health, and it's we talk about athletes, but there's a big component of that is coaches as well. So I know there's some work being done to try and create resources and things like that to try and help support coaches. But yeah, as a first point of call, I think Gary's absolutely right in terms of like just build that network around you and not just talk about different techniques with other coaches. It's actually sharing about your experiences of what real coaching is and what Gary's already demonstrated with his presentation tonight, that warts and all. Like, it's not all, you know, podiums and medals and all that sort of things. There is, especially, you know, from coaching in the Northeast, there's a lot of drudgery that comes with coaching, and sometimes it can be very demotivating. So yeah, kind of building those networks around you and supporting each other is vital. So I think that's really important. I think the bit for me, I go back to, well, why am I doing this? Why am I choosing to do this? And that helps give me a little kickstart in terms of a boost of motivation for why I'm coaching. So why did I start in the first place? Why did I turn up today? And then that helps. So that would be my advice. No, you ask Gary, not me, but that would be my 2 minutes, whatever that's worth. Is this a reflection from Cheryl?
Yeah, it's the first thing about. It's almost like setting in the core values of the group you're trying to do. You set out the rules such as discipline, trust. Yeah, you do, but it's not done in a dogmatic way like you just would start if they come to the session. Say these sessions start at 10:30. They start at 10:30, so you need to be warmed up, ready to go at 10:30, right? And if you turn up late, then you know we can give you a reason, you know, to say that, you know, because they might have a legitimate reason, but they shouldn't turn up routinely late because it's something is disrespectful to someone else. And it's really about trying to get them to see that there's a set of standards because we're trying to get that built. But also that trust only comes through a period of time when you're working with them. And that whole thing about their ambition that's really quite a good question, because sometimes their ambition is filtered through the eyes of their parents. Like, you get people turning up and going, I want to do this, that, and the other. And, you know, how many times do they have to come training each week before they make the Olympics? You know, they're completely disproportionate. Whereas you're trying to get that coaching journey for them, you know, in terms of, you know, regular, often, and as good and enjoyable and as safe as you can get to make sure they're making a progress. But if you're teaching them the basics, they can help to become an achiever, improve their technique and ability over time. I think that's pretty good. But the thing is, I think we'll all get in this time that the trouble with the youth of today, they know the price of everything and the value of nothing. So that's a quote from Oscar Wilde. But it's the fact that sometimes they just want something too quickly. And the trouble with athletics, or the joy of athletics, if you look at it in a different way, is the fact you get rewarded for your hard work. So turning up and working hard is of worth in itself, regardless of whether you become, you know, county champion or national champion, whatever else it may be. So I think when you're putting about there to keep working, improve their technique and ability over time is really important. And I think you're kind of setting up your philosophy about how you're going to coach there. And that's something I wanted to try and get people to think about as part of this thing, is that what would their own set of standards and values be if you're going to coach in this way? So you're already on that journey, so well done. And I might steal some of your ideas as well.
Not a question, but just a bit of a reflection from Joe, just about the impact of the throws community it's had on his coaching journey so far. So that's really great to hear, Joe.
Yeah. Delighted.
Yeah. So any more questions coming in? I know we're getting we're on the hour mark now, but if there are any more questions that people want to fire in, I'm sure Gary's not rushing off right now. Oh, we've had another one. Another question from Joe. Good, nice, bullet pointy as well. What is your greatest achievement as a coach? Great question. Absolutely love that, Joe. Gary, go. Or should I fill while you think?
You better fill a bit. You fill a bit.
Greatest achievement. I'd be really interested to hear like what the group's own greatest achievement is, and when.
I'm ready.
You're ready, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't want anyone else to put in theirs. You just want to
give me a chance to think. This actually it sounds a bit odd, but it's actually a girl called Janet, right? Janet, you've never heard of Janet. Janet she's now got a PhD in geography, so there's another pleasure for me. But she was absolutely rubbish at throwing the discus, absolutely rubbish. But she turned up every week, twice a week, for 5 years, to get marginally better than rubbish. She had no fast twitch fibers whatsoever in her body. They were stripped out at birth. She could barely move at any great speed. But she contributed more to that group than perhaps some of the better athletes. So she was working with people who were like county champions, and some of them were regional medalists and all the rest of it. And she was their friend. She built brilliant friendships, which are lifelong friendships to last through that. But she was actually not very good at all, and she doesn't mind me saying that. She was absolutely rubbish. But the good thing about it is she got an absolutely massive string of A's and B's in her, well, mostly A stars and A's in her GCSEs. But one of the results she got was a C in PE, and she got 100% in the theory paper, but she didn't do very well in the practical paper because she was not very good at practical. But one of the things that did carry her through was her discus technique. But it's the fact that I must have been doing something right with Janet, that she turned up twice a week, every week for 5 years. So I think the greatest achievement was the fact that she still came along, even though she was absolute rubbish. Right, Janet? There's no good denying it. You were absolute rubbish. But you can say that now. But you wouldn't say that at the time. But we kind of like, it was hard to hide. The discus was only barely make it beyond her foot. But it's the fact that she turned up. So something we were doing right as a group, and me as a coach, that she kept coming each week, and she seemed to have good fun, and she seemed to enjoy it. So if you're listening, Dr. Janet Richardson, this one's for you.
Nice. And Joe's response to that was, he loved it.
Yeah. She's a brilliant woman. She was a chip child, brilliant woman, but she wasn't much of a discus thrower.
A lot of love for the throws community tonight, which is fantastic.
Good. I'm delighted to read that too.
So Julie makes them comment around just it's important that people feel welcomed.
Yeah. And if I don't, I'd be surprised, but it needs to happen.
Yeah. Right, and any more absolutely nuggets, golden nuggets of questions that you can throw in, do them now. Because we've had some fantastic ones tonight. I hope it's really like spurred you on to go and think about your own coaching journeys. I think one of the tasks that we did as part of the Futures program, we got the athletes and the coaches to sort of draw out on a piece of paper where they were throughout their whole coaching journeys, with all the highs and the lows and everything in between, and try and put, whether that be on a year by year, whatever sort of progression you want in terms of, oh, well, I started coaching here because I got injured, and then this is what I did. I did this qualification. I felt like I nailed it or not, and then whatever. I've drawn that out myself, and then I've put some like dash lines as to where I want to get as a coach, and that was a really, really powerful thing for me, because I think, one of the reasons I've got this massive whiteboard behind us is because I like to see it quite visual and see where I'm at. So that was quite a nice sort of tool for me to do. I didn't have to make a presentation like Garry has about his reflections, but yeah, drawing that map out of me, because I'm a geography lover as Garry. So if I can map my journey out, it was quite an exciting one. So maybe something that people could do if they wanted to, if they're a visual learner. So
yeah, and I think to reflect on your coaching principles or philosophies, to come up with the reason why you coach, what you want to get out of your groups and stuff, because I think it sort of roots you in the idea that you're doing something which is absolutely important, but it's the fact that it gives you sort of a skeletal framework of values that you can always fall back on. I think if you don't have that, it sometimes it seems to have a bit of lack of direction. I'm with you on the geography front. Geography is the best subject on this earth. That's my top one. A lot of love for geography there tonight, too.
There is. You know what my degree's in?
No, go on.
Geography and sport. Geography and sport science. Combination degree. Loved it. And then specialised in strength and conditioning. So, big fan. David Woff was my favourite geographer.
Yeah. That's because he's got a great big book.
Yeah, man. I needed to read the book because my teacher was only a chapter ahead of me. So, right. Is there any more questions related to anything other than geography? Thank you so much. That's some feedback, so just thank you. Great, love it.
If you speak Polish, Julia, do roboty. That's Polish for get to work. That's all I know, Polish, but that's the best I can do, I'm afraid.
What was the accent like? Get rating that.
That was 4.
If people do, go on.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, if people do need to go, thank you very much for attending. You'll get asked for your feedback afterwards. So yeah, your candid feedback is always very much welcomed. We do try and evolve and develop what we're doing. I know we're going to do another bit of a review at the end of this series of webinars, which we've got on, so that'll be the end of July, about how we deliver that going forward. So yeah, I would really be keen to hear what you want to do, what you want to hear, how you want us to continue to support you in your own coaching journeys as we've spoken about tonight. So yeah, please, your candid feedback in those, and I do troll through them all. That is my Friday morning plans, to go through everyone's feedback and learn as much as I possibly can, and feed it back to the presenters as we go as well. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
But yeah, great job tonight, Gary. Really enjoyed that, and feedback coming in. Everyone's loved what you've done. So
the signpost at the end of that, we didn't get onto, the last slide is about where to get more help. I don't know if someone, so we go on to, whoops. So if anyone needs any other help with that, there's people they can contact there. So these are the people effectively as the parents in charge of the communities in these different areas that will put you in touch with a sibling in the throws world that will help you, or they'll help you move forward themselves. And they're all dead keen to improve throwing, full stop, and help coaching. So there's some really good resources there, and that will be available on the website as well as in your newsletter.
Yeah. And there's me as well on top of that. I don't think I'm on that list. No. So Nick Ridgen is event group lead. So nridgen@athletics.org.
I hope I haven't heard your ego there.
No, it's absolutely fine. Tonight I'm Spencer Duval, so it's all fine.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I'm just going to stop the recording.
Thank you.